Hello and welcome to Matcha Mornings, part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network. I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith, and I'm excited to dive deep on topics around holistic health, the power of food, hormone health, how the practices of yoga can impact our health and well-being, and much more. So grab your cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Matcha Mornings. I'm really excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show, and especially since today is one of the last episodes of 2021. And this week on the podcast, I'm really excited to be joined by Lily Allen-Duenas. I had the privilege of interviewing Lily for my other podcast, Mastering the Business of Yoga, and we had a really fabulous conversation all about social media. So if you are interested in that, I would definitely recommend checking it out. And it was really fun to switch gears for this episode of the podcast and to dive into the more holistic side of what Lily does. She's an international yoga and meditation teacher, as well as the founder of Wild Yoga Tribe and the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. And she really helps overwhelmed individuals reduce their emotional overload and find balance, breath, and space for self-care. And in this episode, she shares her journey with yoga, health, and wellness, what inspired her to become a yoga teacher. And then we dive into the benefits of yoga beyond the physical asana. So including how it can benefit our mental health, bring peace to our lives, and how we can really find balance with a busy, stressful life. So we talk a lot about reducing that emotional overload, finding that balance, and making space for ourselves and our self-care. So lots of goodness in this episode, especially as we near the holiday season and the end of the year, which can be a really busy and stressful time for a lot of us, and then head into the new year with, big goals and all that type of thing. So I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And without further ado, here is Lily. Welcome to the podcast today, Lily. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I am so excited to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. And for those listeners who aren't aware, we've had another conversation on my other podcast, Mastering the Business of Yoga. And so it's fun to be reconnecting and kind of connecting on a sort of similar but different subject and diving into, this world of yoga and this world of wellness in a sort of different way. And so I'm really excited to dive in. But for people who maybe haven't listened to that episode, since it is on a different show, can you share where you're joining us from today?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Calais, France.
Amazing. Sounds absolutely wonderful to be in Europe. It's been so long since I've been over there, and hopefully I'll be able to travel there again soon.
Oh yeah, I hope so. And probably as your listeners can hear, I am not French. I'm from California. I'm from the US, but my husband is French. And so we moved here at the end of 2019.
And so can you tell me a little bit about your health and wellness journey, how you first got into kind of health and wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in California, but my parents weren't yoga teachers or Buddhists or meditators, or it wasn't any type of environment like that. But I was very fortunate that in my community in Sonoma County, Napa Valley area, there was maybe things were happening a little earlier than in other parts of the world or country, because when I was 16 at a local gym, a yoga class was offered. And I really vividly remember my friends and I joking around about yogurt and yoga. I was like, well, how is that? Just making some silly jokes about it because we'd never even heard of it. But we decided to go and try it out because we were interested in, new experiences, new things. You're 16, 17, you want to do something different. And I remember so vividly that classroom, that teacher, what she looked like, what the color of the walls were, where I was in relation to the teacher in the mirrors. It's so vivid, even though it was half my life ago, because I felt like I was coming home. I felt like I was finally had found something that really just deeply resonated and vibrated in my being. And so that began my journey learning of yoga, learning and practicing. But of course it wasn't a regular practice until a few years later when I went to university and had more access to yoga studios and regular classes.
Yeah.
So that was a gift. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing to hear. And it's cool to hear that you were introduced kind of earlier on. And then I think like a lot of our journeys, it sometimes takes us a little bit, especially if we are younger, to kind of get into it. And I remember doing my first yoga class. I was a competitive dancer, and one of the girls' dads was a yoga teacher. And I was like, who's a yoga teacher? Like, that's even a career. Like, I'm like 17, 18. And then getting into college, university, it was when I was like, oh, okay, I feel stress in my life and my body is not as nimble as it was before. And, I'm abusing it pretty heavily with my like college student ways and that type of thing. And really was able to connect then. Did you feel like for you, like doing yoga was something that you had ever seen yourself like teaching or kind of doing as a career? Or where were you kind of at as you started practicing more regularly?
Yeah, great question. So I was in university and I agree. I had high stress levels and really needed an outlet. And so I never saw myself really as being a yoga teacher. I was working in marketing management for about 7 years in the US, always in the nonprofit sector. So always wearing a million hats or I kind of like to say a million shoes because I do not love hats. But I was working marketing management and just that's like I kind of pictured my life more in that direction of maybe ending up in a pencil skirt and Library of Congress doing something, right? Like something in that direction and maybe on the East Coast. And then I just felt this huge calling in my heart for more meaning, more fulfillment. I was doing a ton of volunteer and service work, but I could just feel something was missing. And I also was experiencing a pretty high level of burnout. I liked to use the metaphor. I felt like a campfire. And when you put one log on, then another log, then another piece of firewood, then another. And then if you just put way too many, and the fire's not burning really strongly, you'll actually put your fire out. And so I felt like, oh man, there's just too many logs on my fire. And I was being very burnt out. And so I was doing a lot of soul searching, took about a year of just asking the universe, what am I supposed to do? And one day in a yoga class in Shavasana, it just very, very loud inside of my heart was saying, be a yoga teacher. So here I am.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love hearing that. And I'm curious, did you kind of like listen to that right away? Like, was it kind of the type of thing where you were like, okay, I should go find a yoga teacher training? Or did it take you like, maybe like a couple little prompts or winks from the universe before you're like, okay, I'm listening now?
No, not at all. It was immediate. So I'd been kind of asking that question for about a year. And when I felt that voice in my heart, I think within 2 weeks, I had a plane ticket booked to Nepal, a month sabbatical approved from work. Everything was figured out, ready to go. So I was very quick to respond to that because when it's that loud and it feels that true and you've been waiting that long, I just felt very compelled.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That definitely makes sense. And I think it's cool too that like after spending the time of kind of introspection and kind of asking for what's next, you got this answer and we're able to jump on it right away. And that's like part of the practice of yoga, right? Like it takes this trust in like, is this the right thing? Because it's a big thing to book a teacher training program, to book a month off work, to travel, halfway across the country to go do this thing. And I think it's really easy as humans to kind of let our like lizard brains get in there and kind of doubt that that's what we should be doing.
Oh, well said. Yeah, that it's very, very challenging, sometimes to really listen to that voice. And I know there's a lot of reasons not to do things like that and not to seek this path of uncertainty and, outside of that comfortable cookie cutter that people feel more comfortable in these containers. So it was a challenge, but I was really fortunate to have, supportive family, supportive friends, and also had gone through something, through what I'd been through to kind of lead me to a place of, I really have to listen, I really want to help others on the path of health, wellness, and wholeness. And I know what burnout is. I know what being a perfectionist is, having trauma is. Like, I feel like I've experienced a lot that helps me get you know, be with others through what they're going through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that as well. And so for you, after you did this teacher training, did you start teaching right away, or what did sort of your journey look like with yoga from there?
Yeah. So I thought within probably 72 hours of starting my teacher training, I was like, I think I don't ever want to go home. I think I'm just going to keep this backpack and keep going. But I decided to do it the right way. So I went home and I think I gave 8 weeks notice of work. I was, trying to be as kind as I could to the organization I was with, and packed everything up and sold my car, all those types of things that you have to do to make a transition. And during that time, I was very lucky. There was a local wellness center that I was able to immediately start teaching at a couple of times a week in this time of transition. So I started teaching, maybe within 10 days of getting home to the States. And then within 3 months, I was in Cambodia. I'd accepted a position at an island resort for 3 months teaching yoga there. And then from there went on to Thailand and India and all these different places to continue to teach and also to continue to learn.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. And I know this is one of the things that we talked about with the other podcast interview is just, looking at like your media kit or your resume. It's just incredible how many trainings you've done. And I would love to dive into a little bit of like just this side of the yoga where, as we learn more, I feel like it's kind of like, for me at least, it's been realizing like how deep the well is, and also really realizing how like big the benefits of yoga are, and deeper than just like the physical practice, I guess you could say. Cause I think a lot of us are like, oh, we hear about yoga. It's like great for flexibility. It's, good for the body. It's going to help us build like lean strength. But then I think it's like, as you start studying it, you realize like, sure, there's all those things, but yoga is so much more than this. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of like, as you started training more, diving deeper, like how that experience was for you?
Yeah. I think the physical level is the gateway. That's where we usually come in, is for back pain or something that feels physical, or as well as the stress. I think people recognize that there's a lot of mental health benefits for going, and emotional benefits for going into a yoga class. So for me, I think the gateway was through that kind of mental health arena of using it as a way to calm my chaotic mind and to de-stress and promote kind of relaxation, rest, restoration, and just giving myself that gift of self-care. Yoga has always felt like such an honoring of myself, a way to honor and take time to care for myself. And I think that if you're not your gateway is not the physical, hopefully it would, potentially be that mental side. But of course, there's amazing spiritual benefits as well, depending on how deep you want to go and what you want to learn or focus on. Because I think, as you said, Amanda, the well is so vast and deep that it's easy to maybe feel lost in it. So I think figuring out what really is calling for you, and that can change. It can change over the years too. Can change a lot, and responding to that sensation of, okay, am I yearning for? What do I need, to dig into a little bit more. So for me, actually, I would love to share that maybe it's easy for the ego sometimes to get into the yoga practice, right? Where you're like, oh, I want to do this pose, or I want to go this deep in this pose, or there's all these things you want to maybe physically. But what I realized is I was doing a very dynamic, active yoga practice almost every single day, definitely 6 days a week, for almost 3 years, just completely consistent, completely dedicated, disciplined, at least an hour on my mat, 6, 7 days a week, unless of course I was sick or, something came up, of course. But I was having that practice and I really wasn't progressing in my, flexibility or anything really dramatically. There was no dramatic improvements. And that was kind of hurting my ego a bit. And then this year I really was learning, why on earth do I have to be more flexible? This is not the purpose of the practice at all. And I keep saying it over and over again to everyone else. The purpose is not flexibility. But of course, we have to say it a million times probably until we really hear ourselves say it. We're the last ones to learn the lessons. Sometimes we're teaching others. And I loved that recognition of I'm not in any rush at all. And there's also no reason for me to be more flexible. I show up on my mat so that I can connect get my mind back down from this vata, windy, fast-paced, fast mental state, so I can calm down, ground down. And a grounding practice is very yin. It's very true classic hatha. It's very relaxing. It's not as aesthetic. It's not as dynamic, but there's so much benefit for my mental and emotional health, and also even my productivity. If I'm in a better headspace, I'm able to be a better partner and a better daughter, a better friend, and a better, collaborator with whatever I'm working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I can relate to so much of that. I've got a lot of vata in my constitution as well, and a lot of air in my like astrological chart. So just kind of a very airy person in general. And so I feel like I definitely need those grounding practices. And I think honestly, that was one of the things that kind of kept me coming back to my mat in the beginning. Like, I think I was, obviously I liked maybe going to a hot class and sweating a lot, or like finding that I was gaining more strength. But I think the kind of unearthing I was doing was like, oh, I feel different. I feel grounded. I feel more relaxed after I do this practice. And, obviously now it's kind of like this very, very daily ritual for me to kind of just start my day and kind of get my head right. But I can really relate to this like idea of having these sort of physical goals of like, what's the next pose I'm going to kind of conquer, or, maybe I'll learn to press up to handstand or something like that. And I feel like a couple of years ago, I just was kind of like, I feel like this isn't what this is about for me. Like it doesn't really matter to me if I can ever hold a handstand for 60 seconds or not. Like the thing that matters to me is how I show up in my day-to-day life with like, in my work and in my relationships. And I feel like that's what's important to me for my yoga practice. And that's why I keep doing it. And I mean, if a handstand comes along the way, like that's pretty sweet too, but it's not about that, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I completely agree with you.
Amazing. And so I would love to hear a little bit about like, and maybe we can just share with listeners a little bit about kind of the psychological and mental health benefits of yoga. I feel like we've kind of alluded to how we've both experienced that, but maybe we can talk about it a little bit more tangibly.
Yeah. So I think my favorite element to talk about is how it de-stresses our entire system. So stress affects all systems of the body, all of them. So your muscles, your respiratory system, your cardiovascular, endocrine, your GI, your nervous system. I mean, everything is affected. And yoga has this amazing gift of kind of helping us tap into our parasympathetic nervous system. So two sides of it, sympathetic, active, being focused, awake, thinking, working, parasympathetic, digest, rest, your immune system, your memory is being consolidated. So it's this normal functioning for a human would be to just gently oscillate between the two every, few hours, because people sometimes equate sympathetic with just fight flight. And it's not just fight flight. It is that active thinking working. So the yin and the yang, right? We're just supposed to gently oscillate between the two. So what happens is, and it's really rough in our modern world, is we really get locked in. We get stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. And this is where we really wear down the tissues of our body. And of course, people get stuck in the parasympathetic as well with depression or lethargy, or you just can't think clearly. But really, I think in our Western world, the sympathetic is where we get locked in for, days and weeks at a time, can't shut it shut it down, can't regulate back. Because all of our phones are constantly ringing. There's all these sounds outside. We're getting all these emails. We have such a long to-do list, and going from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing without pause. And what I value so much about my yoga practice is that it's helped me reprogram, kind of in a way, my sympathetic nervous system so that I can reframe my relationship to it. It helps me to kind of pause, think, what am I feeling? What's actually happening? What am I creating in my mind? And it helps me choose my response. So with stress, we don't have a yellow alert or orange alert. We only have red alert. That's it. That is the only gear. There's no low gear for the nervous system. It's all just high gear, or, red alert. So when it's for this mental health side of yoga, it's going to help you tap in to your physiological response to stress. You're going to be able to kind of develop these techniques through meditation, through yoga asana, through pranayama. That's going to help you have a little bit more space. You're not going to have that tight grip on everything. And when you can release your grip, you're able to have that pause where you can hopefully kind of decrease your stress response and decrease your activation of the parasympathetic. So instead of constantly feeling like you have to be alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic, you can realize, okay, I'm just going to calm down, relax. And when you're able to do that, as I said, it's amazing for your digestive system and for your immune function. There's so many benefits to be tapping into more restorative and calming practices, and to elicit that parasympathetic response, to actually get your body into that space. You don't have to do a full 90-minute yoga class. You can meditate for 10 minutes. Do anything very repetitive is very good, like mantra chanting, or even just doing 5 sun salutations. Anytime you do a inversion, getting your head below your heart. So when I think of these mental health benefits, I'm thinking of all of these beautiful way that the body actually is responding physiologically to yoga. It's amazing to me how it can help me kind of shut off my adrenal glands, keep that 3 cup of coffee IV drip of adrenaline that we're used to being on just through our own hormone system, to help kind of regulate back to a safer space. I feel so grateful that yoga has this de-stressing, anxiety inducing, insomnia prevention benefits that it has when we can release stress and reduce anxiety. It's amazing, the gifts that it gives.
Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the show to talk about Energy Bits. Energy Bits are spirulina tablets made of one ingredient, algae. Nothing added, nothing subtracted, just 100% plant-based algae nutrition. No sugar, no caffeine, no gluten, no soy, no additives, no GMOs, no preservatives, no binders, nothing artificial. Just 100% algae, 100% green, 100% healthy, and 100% pure. Pure and simple, the way food should be. They have high protein, high beta carotene, high iron, high chlorophyll, high antioxidants, and over 40 plus vitamins, including the B vitamins. They have electrolytes, including magnesium, potassium, and are a great source of essential fatty acids. Honestly, I could go on and on and on about how great Energy Bits are for you, and that's why I've decided to partner with them. If you want to learn more about Energy Bits or order some yourself, you can head on over to energybits.com to learn more. Use the code WANDERBARN to get 20% off your order. Once again, that's energybits.com and use the code WANDERBARN for 20% off your order. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing so much good stuff there. And I think that we really live in this world where we are so busy all the time and we're so connected, and we're on these screens all day long. We're sitting all day long. We're working more than ever. And then you kind of add what's been going on over the last couple of years with the pandemic. And I feel like it's just such a recipe for stress and anxiety. And a lot of people don't have like the tools in their toolbox for how to de-stress. And so it's kind of like we wake up, we drink our coffee. And I know you mentioned kind of like this internal coffee, but so many people are also living off of like actual coffee on top of like this kind of innate stress response that they have in their bodies. And then we're just so wired staring at these screens, working all day, maybe not eating properly. And then we kind of carry that into our evenings, and then we probably don't sleep as well. And I just feel like for a lot of us, we're in these cycles of like not really living holistically, not really living super, super healthy. And I think it's really beautiful to know that there is this practice that can really start to help us in these little ways, like just start to help, our nervous system start to regulate and start to decompress a little bit. And kind of with that in mind, I guess one thing I'd love to hear your thoughts on is for somebody who maybe is that example of like they're like, you just described me, like I sustain off coffee, I'm stressed all day, I'm not sleeping well, I don't really have these practices. Like, how do you get started with this? Like, how do you start finding this balance? How do you start making this space for your self-care and that type of thing?
Amanda, I love that question. And I love also the gift of getting to help other people find their way and what works for them and what habits they want to cultivate and what resonates. I just love the opportunity to work with people with that individually. But generally, I would say my first piece of advice, if you feel like you don't have time for anything and everything is hard and everything is crazy and you have no time, and I know that I've been there. But if we can just get 15 minutes, you wake up 15 minutes earlier. I think that's enough time for you with 15 minutes to see a change. I love recommending that you do not look at your phone. You use the alarm. Okay. You wake up, the alarm goes off, but have your phone set to airplane while you sleep. Just turn off the alarm. Do not look at anything on your phone for 15 minutes. That's the plan. Not even get a look. And then you just either lay in bed or sit up in bed and meditate for 5 minutes, meditate for 15, whatever feels good. Just calm breaths, maybe a visualization. Maybe you're listening to a teacher on Insight Timer. I'm there too, if you want to hang out with me on Insight Timer. So with some free meditations, but just calming the breath, even if you're doing mantra, Om chanting for 5 minutes. I love doing that in my first 15 minutes of waking up. And then if you have a little extra time or you only meditated for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, then just do some gentle anti-rheumatic, just very simple yoga poses. You can do it in bed. You can do it on the carpet next to your bed. You can roll out your yoga mat, whatever feels good. But if you can just roll your shoulders, do a few cat cows, lay in child's pose for, 5 breaths. There's so many benefits for the body to have that extra lubrication of the joints in the morning. You're going to give yourself such a nice little cushion. So I think that's generally what I advise is just 15 minutes to get you started.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as much as my yoga practice has come fairly easily for me over the last, I guess, what would it be, like decade, I would say that I've been developing this. I feel like meditation is something that I would probably describe up until the last maybe year as something that was more on and off. Like I'd go through these phases of my meditation practice would be really strong and really consistent and I'd feel really good. And then, something would happen in my life, like a vacation or a change in my work schedule or something, and I'd get totally thrown off. And I feel like, just like you said, like one of the things that's really helped me has just been waking up and doing it right away. And I let myself do it in bed, which is something that I love. It's like I get like 10, 15 more minutes of bedtime and I don't go back to sleep. I make sure I'm like awake enough. And I usually have somebody kind of prompting me or something that's kind of going in my ears so that I'm focusing on something and not just, snoozing for 15 more minutes. But I feel like for me, that was like the thing that has got me consistently doing it. And then I can get up and, do a bit more of my physical practice and then get into my day from there. So if anyone else is like, I like bed a lot, I feel like that's really worked for me personally.
Happy to hear it, Amanda. I totally agree with you. First things first.
Yeah. I had one friend that was like, he's like, I can't do it because I just fall back asleep. So, I mean, definitely not for everyone. I think if you're falling asleep, maybe that's a sign that you're tired, right? Like if you're waking up and then you're falling right back asleep, like your body is probably telling you, your mind's telling you you're tired, you need to rest more. That's something to potentially listen to as well. But yeah, I think, if it works for you and you're comfortable like that and it gets you doing it, I think that that's a really beautiful way to start the day. And then do you have any tips for kind of, from there, maybe carrying on with like creating a morning routine or creating some more sort of like sacred practices to get your day started?
Oh, yeah. And I love the word sacred. That's my favorite way to describe what we're trying to develop here, because it is this morning ritual, this sacred time that you're honoring yourself. You're honoring your body, your mind, your spirit, your emotions. You're honoring that you deserve to be taken care of. You deserve to do things for yourself. It can be really a beautiful practice just to realize how much we pour into everything else and how little we pour into ourselves. I feel like when you described, Amanda, that life we live of, you wake up, you rush to the gym, you rush home, you grab a smoothie, you run to work, you have 5 meetings after work, you go to volunteer, then you come home and then you veg out in front of the TV. And then it's like, when are you ever with yourself? I just feel so lonely. Like you've abandoned yourself. And so it's coming home to yourself, creating practices where you are loving yourself and taking time to be with yourself. And I think that's important to figure out what resonates and what feels right for you. I think morning journaling practices are beautiful. I think a gratitude journal is really great for end of day instead of beginning of day. I like to jot down 3 things I'm grateful for every day, even if it's just the color of the leaves or that my little plant on my desk flower looked extra, extra bloomy today or something. I like writing just 3 little things to keep that perspective top of mind. And end of day is a great time to do it after everything's wrapped up. Also having a sankalpa, an affirmation, a resolve, something that you repeat to yourself, trying to do it on your first thing you think of when you wake up. The first thing you smile, you say your sankalpa. It's a great practice. So is pranayama, some breath work. If you could do Brahmari, hummingbee breath for just 3 minutes a day, you're going to help stimulate your thyroid, regulate your hormones. There's so many benefits to Brahmari, and especially with the nervous system and with the hormone levels. So there's these different things to try to see what fits. There's a lot of tools for the toolkit. Even listening to uplifting words from others, like podcasts or YouTubes that with something that really resonates and makes you feel uplifted and makes you think and reflect. And there's great practices. I think it's about finding what's right for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That makes me think that I was going through kind of a transition, I guess, about 7 years ago, and I moved and I spent a lot of time. I would walk to this like not up the whole mountain because I'm from the Canadian Rockies. So that would be like a big, a big adventure. But I'd go partway up the mountain to this like little area and put some Alan Watts in. And I would just sit and kind of look at the mountains and just kind of contemplate. And I feel like there's something about the mountains for me that always really makes me feel very like small in kind of a good way. Like it kind of just reminds me of like how big and grand and beautiful the earth is. And his words are so powerful. And I felt like that was something that, I don't do it anymore, but for a phase of my life, that was something like you're talking about, where just having that, to do a couple times a week was something that was really impactful for me and made a huge difference, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
I'm so happy to hear you did that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so I think that self-care is like one of those things that maybe gets, I don't know what the right word is, maybe like villainified sometimes, like, oh, self-care is not that easy. Some people can't do it. There's a lot of things that have to happen for some people to have time and energy to do self-care. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about, maybe your like top tips for just caring for ourselves a little bit more kind of throughout the day. And then also maybe some of the things that you do that you find really helpful. And especially when it comes to like the balancing of our work and the balancing of our stress and the balancing of, these busy, anxious lives that we tend to lead.
Yeah, I totally get that for sure. And I'm glad that you brought up that self-care gets vilified kind of, because it got super trendy, like buzzword trendy. And then I think it got kind of a bad rep because people were using it as an excuse to like buy a cupcake every day. So I think that it has a little complicated connotations currently, but I do not believe that self-care is, having a cupcake every day or just going on one spa weekend. Well, they both can be. I think it's more about developing habits and routines and practices that, as I said, honor yourself and bring you back home to yourself. So in terms of trying to develop some self-care little habits, a little micro habits, how about that, to get us through our chaotic, busy lives. I really love Thich Nhat Hanh's app, Plum Village. The app itself is called Plum Village, and it's free, and you can set a bell on a timer. And it's a very, very peaceful little gong, or a singing bowl. It's very calming. And I have it I have it ding every hour on the hour from 11 to 5 p.m. And I use it as a time to close my eyes, take 3 very deep, slow breaths. And I love days in which I'm like jamming through a bunch of emails and creating a bunch of things and feeling, and I have 5 client emails and a deadline. And I feel like I don't have time for those breaths. Those days where you just feel like you're moving a million miles a minute. And it's the best reminder that if I feel like I don't have time for that breath, I need that breath. So I really take a big, slow, deep breath. And then I try as hard as I can to make sure then if I can, that moment, then I go for a 15-minute walk outside, or I just sit down on the meditation cushion for 10 minutes for a little guided meditation. Because if I'm feeling that chaotic, then I'm really dysregulated. And if I'm dysregulated, I'm not functioning very well for myself. I don't know how I am or how, I want to show up for others. So I try to always respond when I notice I'm resisting being with myself. I'm resisting taking a pause. And I think it's very important every hour that we do something like 3 deep breaths or standing up and doing a couple standing yoga poses. And I'm not telling anyone, oh, stand in tree. It's just like, just move your body, move your body every hour. Or when I worked in an office, every time I went to the bathroom, and I used to try to do something on the walk there that was very, very mindful, like Om, walking with saying Om or saying an affirmation, or for a while there, I would even do lunges on the way to the bathroom just to move my body in a way that felt like doing something it wanted, So I think listening to yourself and developing that relationship where you are listening, that's the biggest act of self-care.
Yeah. I love that. I'm just imagining like you lunging through your office and just, the people who are kind of not into this being like, what the heck is going on? What is she doing?
Oh yeah. I got teased. That's for sure. But hey, I do me. So I kept it up.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as we should, like, why not get up and do 10 squats or 10 push-ups or lunge to the bathroom? Like, I mean, really, we should be like encouraging each other to do that. And I think, I work at a computer and stuff like that. So I'm not, shaming anyone who works in an office or at a computer, because I'm in the exact same boat. And I know that it's so easy to just get so into the work that you're doing that you can forget to stand up and you can forget to eat and you can forget to like, honor the fact that you have to go to the bathroom, and then you'll pull yourself out of that and do it so fast that you're barely even giving your mind a time to like take a little pause. But yeah, I love those like little tips of how to just bring more mindfulness and awareness into your day. And I also like how you brought up, just the difference between like taking care of ourselves, like this actual idea of self-care, and then maybe something that's more of like a treat version of self-care. Like I love massages and I do feel like massages are self-care for me, but it's not how I care for myself every day, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I'm glad you differentiated the two.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. Well, we've talked about a lot of good stuff in terms of how to kind of bring in, balance, how to regulate our systems, how yoga and mindfulness can really help with this. Is there anything else that you want to share kind of related to this or related to your yoga journey?
No, I just feel so grateful to get to spend this time with you, Amanda, and to hopefully share something that's of some use to a listener or two. I just feel very grateful for this time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap up, let's share a little bit about, what you're up to. I know you mentioned that you're on Insight Timer. You also have, an amazing business, Wild Yoga Tribe, and a podcast. Can you share, all the goodness that you have going on in your life?
Thank you for so much. I would love to. So yes, my website is wildyogatribe.com. It's full of resources, blogs and entries and videos, and you're welcome to come check that out. There's a lot there. And I'm on social media at Wild Yoga Tribe everywhere. You would want to find me. I am on social media there. And my podcast, Wild Yoga Tribe, is amazing. I'm loving it. Every week I interview a yoga teacher from a different country around the world. My goal is to do one teacher in every country. Big goal, big long-term one. I'm about 23 countries in, and it's just the most amazing thing. I love hearing their stories, learning more about their countries and what yoga is like there. Like this yoga teacher from Mexico, she would move to a small village outside of Guadalajara, and she said that they all thought she was a bruja, that she's a witch, and they kind of still are very resistant to this. But over the years that she's been there, I think it's been about 10 years of her in this community, they've started to trust her more and more. And it was such a beautiful thing to learn. Or in the Philippines, very Catholic culture, when a mantra was introduced, and when the teacher said when he started doing more mantras, people were very offended, and they said it was, going against their religion to have that involved. And just learning more about this, about how is a culture challenged or supported by yoga, and how does the community respond? It's been just an amazing learning experience. And then as well as, of course, hearing the yoga teachers' stories, their philosophies on yoga, their journeys, and what's moving through them, with the practice, and what do they have to share with our listeners about the practice and going deeper. And I love it. So also, if anyone, of course, wants to hang out with me off of social media, but still online, I do teach private yoga classes and meditation classes, and I'm a wellness coach as well. So if you need any help in any area, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm really excited for 2022. Hope to do a retreat, hope to get some workshops going. So definitely, stay in touch, keep an eye out, because there's good things on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. That's all really amazing. And I think it's so cool that you've set this goal of interviewing, a yoga teacher from every country in the world, and that you've already got 23. Is your plan like once you've interviewed like somebody from the US, for example, you're not going to interview another American yoga teacher until you've hit all the countries?
Ooh, great question. And I waffle back and forth. So at first I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And now I feel like I will. But I'm probably going to maybe start reintroducing what I'll call, I think, like return trip to Germany, another, book another, whatever. I'm still figuring it out, but I think when I get a few more episodes under the belt, maybe when I hit 50 or something, I'll start to tap into some countries again, because there's so many amazing stories and so much to learn. I don't want to, of course, eliminate a yoga teacher story from my podcast just because I've already had a teacher from there. But since I'm just in the first I don't know if there's a less than, there's just, just a hair under 200 countries in the world. And I'm only at 23. I'm not quite at a high enough percentage where I want to go do double dip yet.
Yeah, I know for sure. I totally hear that. I mean, it's kind of like traveling, right? It's like you go to Europe and you're like, well, I want to travel to all these countries I haven't been to. You don't necessarily just want to return to the same one over and over again. So, but I also hear you, like, having to podcast myself and having interviewed, hundreds of people. It's so hard because you're like, oh, but you have an amazing story too. And so do you. And so do you. So yeah.
Sure. You got it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lily. This has been really wonderful. It's been so awesome to connect with you again. And I'm really excited to share this episode with the world.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been a joy to be with you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. To find links mentioned in this episode, show notes, photos, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/matcha-mornings. To be the first to know about brand new episodes of Matcha Mornings, subscribe on your podcast app. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, please leave a review or send me an email at wanderbarn@gmail.com with the subject line Matcha Mornings. To follow along with me, Amanda Kingsmith, you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Kingsmith to learn more about other fun projects I'm working on. To find more great podcasts like this one on topics such as travel, the business of yoga, cryptocurrency, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.